Hi, welcome back to another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Well, as the snow flies, as we get into winter, we bring you a November episode that's packed full of all kinds of information. And we start with University of Detroit Mercy head coach, Chris Kolon. Chris is going to spend some time explaining how fall ball was for him and bringing in new recruits. And the bigger news, moving from the Atlantic Sun to the NEC in 2025, Chris will have a rundown of exactly who is changing and sort of the landscape that keeps moving, but they'll be in a more competitive league for the University of Detroit Mercy in 2025, and Chris will give us that explanation. We also get a chance to check in with Bryce Brubaker from 313 Lacrosse. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the product of mesh and all that entails being able to restring your stick. And we're going to get also a chance to talk to John Losey, one of the co-hosts. We're going to talk a little bit about seeding and the MHSAA's process with where they're headed in the sport and kind of what goes on with the seeding process and how fair is it. Maybe we'll get that discussion going a little bit. Hopefully that brings up some water cooler discussion within the ranks of the lacrosse world. We'll see. But we'll get off this to a good start with Chris Kolon. We'll be back with him in just a second. Back, we're going to check in with University of Detroit Mercy head lacrosse coach Chris Kolon, who is in the middle, almost to the middle end of his fall season. And there's a bunch of announcements. We're going to talk a little bit about changing leagues in 2025. And for the November edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review, Chris, we just thought we'd spend a couple minutes to kind of check in, and we're doing that with a number of coaches. And let's start with the biggest news, which is, first of all, thank you for talking to us. And obviously the second question is change in leagues, which has got to be huge for you.
Yep. Greg, thanks for your interest, and we appreciate all the work you do for lacrosse, for us, and for generally in the state of Michigan. So thanks so much. So we're in the Atlantic Sun right now. We're for this season, this winter and spring coming up, and then we're going to shift into the NEC, and we're really looking forward to it. It's got more of a footprint that's what we're used to in the MAC when we were successful. A lot of schools that look like us, have budgets like us, recruit like us, have that kind of same feel educationally. So we're really looking forward to that. When our current league, you have a whole bunch of different schools with a lot of different budgets and a lot of different kind of missions and what an athlete does in a day. So we're looking forward to kind of playing guys like us again. So that's going to be a great step in the right direction for us. And we're just looking forward to it.
So you're going from the Atlantic Sun to the NEC. Talk about the teams in the NEC. Who's in that conference that will be with you in 25?
So that's a big question mark. And I'm not sure. At the moment, there's a lot of negotiations. In college sports right now, you see it with football and everything. There's just a lot of conference movement. So they have some anchors, right? They have Wagner, that's an LIU. Lemoyne is in the conference. VMI is going to join us in the conference as an outsider.
Right now, you have 5 teams. Am I correct?
Correct. Right.
Because you lost 2 teams after you guys joined.
Right. Well, we joined, VMI and us joined, and then we lost Sacred Heart and Merrimack. They joined the MAC in all sports, but it was a move for basketball.
Okay. With the minimum being 6 to get an NCAA opportunity to play in postseason, I'm assuming that the commissioners and everybody in the NEC are figuring out they've got to find another team.
Yeah, we'll be at 6 or 7. I'm very confident about that. There's a bunch of schools, and I don't want to speculate on it, but there's some schools moving up from Division II. There's some current schools. I will tell you this. I think, VMI and Detroit, I don't think they'll go any further south than VMI. VMI will be an outlier, and they will definitely not go any further west. They're a Northeast conference. So, I'm looking forward to kind of recruit back in the Northeast a little bit more. And I like eating that kind of food and doing that kind of travel out that way. So we're just looking forward to that. And I'm very confident in the commissioner and her game plan and what she's going to do I think it's an issue of whether it's a full NEC team or just the lacrosse team, and she's going to walk carefully through that.
All right, just briefly before we get into talking about the fall season and some of your new players, equity is kind of the movement, is the why you move backwards. To go when I say backwards, sideways, whatever that might be.
Fairness, maybe fairness and equity, sure.
Okay, if that's part of that, I mean, think of every high school organization. Every high school league is based on enrollment, which more often than not, enrollment also means dollars. But that being said, is in that formula, is Notre Dame the anomaly in that formula? Because you guys are all parochial schools with budgets, and Notre Dame doesn't really fit anywhere.
Well, Notre Dame has an ABC contract for football, right? So they're still they're a big time athletics program. And if you talk to Kevin, he's just such a great mentor to me, because for most of Notre Dame's history, right, they kind of walk that small Midwestern college lifestyle, right? A lot of times if I'm griping about something, I can call him and he'll be like, well, I had to do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of times he had it worse than I've ever had. So, they've built the program, and, they've been around for a long time. They have a lot of old alumni now, guys that are retired from their jobs, great careers. And they're looking to kind of donate back where, we're in that period where our oldest alumni is in his 30s, still paying a little bit of school debt, buying a house, and has a new baby at home. So I think once you kind of get to that point where you have some of those older alumni that have some expendable income, and that once you're 60, you have to start writing out checks for tax reasons and things like that. Notre Dame had a kind of a big jump, and they've got a lot of funding, and on top of that, they've got big football, right? So they've got a lot of benefits from that too. So it's been amazing what he does, and it's a blueprint for a Catholic school in the Midwest, and they have some advantages, we have some differences and advantages and disadvantages, but he's been so great to us, and I'm looking forward to, we scrimmage them or play them every year, and it's just always such a gift. He's told me stories that he had to sell programs, and he talk about a guy that's just done it all, and that's why I think most of us are just so happy when he won the national championship. I think if you knew the story from point A to that national championship, what a wild ride, and he's just so lucky, and he's a good dude that deserves it. So,
think how many times they came close. 2010, the goal in overtime, just a variety of opportunity. I also think that Kevin would tell you, because he said this to a number of people, including myself, is that I asked him one time when the Notre Dame job became important, and he said when I took over. So I think there's also the confidence in knowing he was going to take that someplace. So I think that's part of that process. Question comes to mind, Chris. Would you be a better recruiter with more money? It's a hard question.
Yeah. I think yes and no, right? If I had the ability to, I think I do a pretty good job identifying talent. What I'd like a little bit more money to do is I would love, some of these guys are lucky enough to go in to somebody's living room, right? And really get to know a kid and know a family. We have great families, and we've learned how to do it and kind of adapted to how we do things. Like, we had a great family yesterday, and you kind of learn what kind of people you want to be around, and you use references. But if we had a little bit more money, you could just go a little deeper into that process where you could, get to know people a little bit more. So that would help. And I think that, and you could also tell your story a little bit deeper than we're able to. So would it help? Sure. I think we've learned to do what we do the best we can, but yeah, it would help. And I think it's just on a level of man, I would love to take somebody out to dinner and go in their living room and tell them about Detroit and hear about them versus, while we're on a visit and, you got a 40-minute meeting and you're just looking. And again, I feel the most important thing in any recruiting situation is the players, right? If the players think they want to be, teammates with a guy, and it goes both ways, that's my most important indicator. Like, we know talent, we know what we can develop, but those interpersonal relationships are so important.
You obviously have been in fall ball. Just briefly, maybe you mentioned it when we were talking last on some of the programs last year on Titan Review. You had recruited better talent and that you might have had recently. So talk a little bit about the fall and how do things look?
Yeah, I'm really happy with the amount of work we put in. We've gotten back to kind of a great work schedule, right? We haven't really focused on details, but I think we did a lot of focusing on details because we didn't have anything else to do. And last year with kind of the basics of running, catching, throwing, your strength, how you're sleeping, all that kind of stuff. So we've really honed in on it, and the kids have done just an amazing job. And I feel like we've got that kind of and this way I say it to the kids, we've gotten a little bit of our nasty back that we've had in the past. So that's a really positive step. The kids have put in such an effort to get to that point that I hope we look like a different team than we've looked in the past, and they're really doing their part to do that. Our underclass, in general, our underclassmen have really performed well. I think the kind of the workload, raising that workload a little bit was a little bit tough at the beginning, but they're very skilled. And I think now that we're kind of have that basis of how we work and how we're going to continue to work, now as we focus onto those little bits of skill that we need, and we'll get more skillful, and we'll work a little bit together, and we'll start putting in the things that we need to put in. And I think we're going to be looking very different than we looked last year.
Earlier in the interview, you talked a little bit about knowing families and finding out a little bit about the kind of players you recruit. Are you recruiting nasty maybe more now than you were even a year ago?
It's a different kind of nasty with today's kids, right? Like these kids are, they're gentlemen in the classroom. They're the kind of kids you want your daughter to marry, but when you step on the field, they're learning that they got to turn on that part of that button again. Yeah, I mean, we have a couple kids. I've known their parents for a long time, so we kind of know we know that situation, and I've just been really pleased with that, and the find the right time to get that aggression out, and to know when you need to be that way, and then when you need to be opening a door for someone and being a good student. They're all really bright kids. Academically it's been going really well. So we're gonna work on the lacrosse part and get better there.
Last question. If you stepped on the field tomorrow in this beginning of the season, you feel more comfortable this year than you did a year ago?
I think we're a better team. We'll see what the outcomes, what kind of outcomes come out of that. I mean, we had, our Robert Morris game was exciting, and I think we have potential to play like that all the time. We just have to be, consistent in our behaviors and our activities. I think we're going to be a better team. I'm enjoying this group a lot more than I enjoyed the group last year. I think we'll be better, and we're going to continue to work on that, and we'll see what outcomes happen, right? And we'll continue to get better, and we'll continue to work through outcomes. That's what these kids sign up for, and that's what they know they need to do, and we'll continue to do it.
The fall completely finishes for you when?
It finishes November 16th. That's our day. We run from campus. We run through kind of all the neighborhoods of Detroit. We run through bad neighborhoods, good neighborhoods, residential, business neighborhoods, and we run all the way down to the Joe Louis Fist, and that's where they get their new helmet and their new set of gloves. That's kind of that you made it, and it's kind of the end and the beginning of the next section of lacrosse, where we have to get really serious about it, and we eat some Coney dogs, and then we go home.
A little time to sleep into November and early December to get ready for the road in January.
Oh yeah, I'm hitting the road this weekend. The road for me starts right now, and is going to go all the way right up into the end of January. So the recruiting season is, I feel the fall for a program like us it's a pretty critical recruiting season. I think it gets really interesting now in the next couple of weeks when football ends, So, these are kind of these are good events that we're going to, but I really like it when football ends and where we kind of and how we recruit and in the recruiting landscape, it's a very critical time for us.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you have 6 weeks to get ready for the season. We'll get back to you in January, and we look forward to Titan Review again. We'll do that starting probably the second week of January every week, and best of luck.
Thank you very much for helping out.
We want to thank Chris for taking a couple seconds out to explain the differences between the Atlantic Sun and the NEC and talk a little bit about his team this past fall. And it'll be fun to see what happens in the spring. The one nice thing about 2025 is that we won't be spending so much time on buses because the distance from the NEC is a lot shorter than it might be from the Atlantic Sun. So that said, it'll be kind of fun. We got a couple of short episodes coming up before John and I talk about the seating conference. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back in just a couple seconds.
Hey guys, my name is Luke Warango. I'm a junior LSM here at Hope College. I wear number 7, and I'm here to walk you through a drill today that you can work on at home, either inside or in a gym at your school, wherever. With winter coming up, it's really important to keep those stick skills dialed, and even if it's too cold outside or there's too much snow not permitting you to play, it's something you can do just to keep those stick skills nice and sharp. All right, let's get into it. So I'm here in the wonderful Dow Center. There's basketball practice and track practice going on outside, as I'm sure you can hear. And I'm in the racquetball courts, which is a perfect place to do this drill. However, you don't need this large of a space. As you can see, I have these wonderful walls, which are perfect for wall ball. But yet here, I'm able to work on my ground balls, getting it up and getting it out. That's going to be the premise of our drill today. I also want to add, you don't need a wall to throw against to do this drill. It's just an added bonus. How this drill is going to start is you have a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball just out in front of you. You're going to take your stick, you're going to pull it back to your feet and goose it up. Pull it back to your feet and goose it up. This allows for coordination between your feet and your stick, so you get comfortable making plays not only with your stick but with your feet as well. This is something I've incorporated into not only practice but pregame, so I'm able to be much more comfortable getting the ball out of scrums or clearing the ball into space to then be able to start making progressions up the field. This is what it looks like all put together. Now with this, you can get as creative as you want, whether that's goosing it behind your back, spinning around, using both hands on your passes, throwing behind the backs, whatever your heart desires. That's the beauty of lacrosse, is you can be as creative as you'd like with it. Thanks for tuning in with me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and roll Dutch.
Hi, this is Bryce Brubaker from the 313 Lacrosse store. Today we're going to talk about the new advancements in lacrosse mesh. So as the years went on, we went from leather pockets to hard mesh, and now to what they call semi-soft and semi-hard mesh. This was really perfected by East Coast Dyes. A company started just a few years ago, about 10 years ago. And what they've done with mesh now is made it so when you string into the stick, you can basically have a ready-to-go pocket almost immediately. So before, you had your hard mesh where you'd have to pound in the pockets, you'd have to soak them in water, baseball bats, all that stuff that you guys remember. And now, just string it up, hit it a few times, and it's ready to go. So this has allowed players to really just keep their sticks ready and perform better on the field. If you're looking to string up your stick, new mesh costs around $20 to $25 a piece. This is a pretty big jump and has caused a lot of stir in the industry. But with that, you're going to get a perfect pocket every time. So this is the most popular piece of mesh on the market right now. It's the semi-soft mesh from East Coast Dyes, and it runs $24.99. And then a string kit on top of that's another $10. And then of course you got to get somebody to string it. Now that your stick is strung up, you can look at about 1 to 3 months of use out of it. Some players more, some players less, depending how much they use it. We at 313 Lacrosse, we use expert stringers. We've been doing it for years here. If you need your stick strung up, check us out in Grosse Pointe Woods, Michigan.
Welcome back to Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman. We're obviously talking with John Losey, one of the co-hosts here. And John, we've got Sunday night, kind of fitting up for our November show. We're going to talk about a couple of things, but for this show and coming up a little bit, we're going to see a little bit of Chris Kolon talking about the new NEC. We're going to have that conversation in just a couple of seconds, and a little bit about UDM's new season. I think that'll be pretty interesting. You also had a chance to sit down with the Brother Rice coach and talk a little bit about that.
Yep, head coach Ajay Chawla. You know, he another state championship last year for Brother Rice, and you know, it's amazing what he's been able to do and really take the reins from Rob Ambrose over the years. And you know, it's a good interview. I think everybody will enjoy it.
You wonder if it's a machine and it's a technique or it's a coaching, but I think it's a fair argument for both of those. But obviously, he's had a great career.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we talk about in the interview. We talk about, you know, I mean, I've always said this from the get-go. I mean, people don't understand. I mean, Brother Rice is just an institution in terms of lacrosse. Kids are going there to play, and you know, to manage the the environment and the parents and everything you have to do with over there. It takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. It's not just coaching.
I think of the poor teams from Rice in terms of losing to Heartland and losing to Catholic Central, which is only the 2 times they've lost since they've started this with the MHSAA. And I know I've talked to some of those kids, and they almost make it like they had a losing career, and they lost 2 or 3 games, you know, in their entire career. So it's an interesting dichotomy, but off we press.
Yep.
One of the big news announcements we want to talk briefly, and Chris will mention this a little bit later, but UD Mercy is going to roll into the NEC, and I think that's a great job for 2025. Thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, it's something that you know, has been talked about for a while now. I mean, you know, it's just really where the program is. You know, recruiting's been difficult coming out of COVID with, you know, 5th-year guys and older kids coming to school and moving around. It's made the landscape more difficult for schools like, you know, UDM. And I think that this is going to really level the playing field. There's going to be an automatic qualifier, so that's going to be great for them too. And I think just from a competition standpoint and for the kids' standpoint, I think it's going to be great.
Well, it's going to be an automatic qualifier to a point, because right now there were 8 teams in the NEC, 2 left. UD came in, obviously, but now they're down to 5. They have to have 6 as an NCAA requirement. I'm sure they'll find somebody that wouldn't let those teams go without that being the case. But it is pretty much everything north of Georgia in terms of travel. So you're not going to have to make the trip to Jacksonville. You're not going to some of the bus trips. It does become money, because these guys last year, UD took trips to places on a bus that was sometimes 12 to 14-hour rides.
Oh yeah.
How do you do that to a college kid? You don't, and that's kind of part of that process.
Yeah. No, I mean, with you know, they had the trip down to Ohio State, and then they just continued on down to Mercer, and that is just, you know, you don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. This year will be interesting. One of the questions I asked Chris was, do you prepare for a season when you're leaving a league differently than you prepare for a season coming up, looking at the NEC? He said, well, recruiting changes a little bit because it's a different athlete for the NEC than it might be for the MAC or it might be for the Atlantic Sun. But the reality is, if you're one of the top teams in that league, you still have to be able to have athletes that can compete stepping out into the tournament. Because obviously, if you're going to be a lower seed, you're going to end up facing a Maryland or a Michigan or a Notre Dame. You're going to face those kinds of teams. So I said, do you prepare any different? He says, no. He says, you know, winning is winning, and it is the rest of it. But I got to think, if you're leaving the league, you certainly want to win and maybe be the upset team in that process. But I don't know how. I don't know how you can just kind of walk away from the idea that you're getting ready for 25 and you still have 24. Because what do you do to the seniors that have been here for 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, you got to go into it. Winning is winning, right? And we've seen the last 2 years it's been a struggle for UDM, and Chris will be the first to admit it. And so I think, you know, this year, now you're 2 years in, you got some of these kids that came in as freshmen that were really thrown into the fire right out of the gate. And now those guys are going to be juniors, and you're going to have some seniors now. So, you know, I think it's kind of you're in and you're out, but I think it's a combination of the two.
Okay, that's good. We're going to do those things. We had a chance as broadcast partners to be able to cover all those games in 24. It'll be interesting to see the schedule. I don't think the schedule's out yet. It'll be out on my
Seen pieces. I
think there's some still arguments about where they're going to play with Notre Dame, and I know there's an argument between them and the University of Michigan,
Ohio State.
Yeah, we're bringing some games in, and they certainly want to be able to keep those in place. But the funny part of college season is that the college season seems to get earlier and earlier. It was unusual to play in February. Now it's the first week of February. You got to wonder if there's going to be teams backing it up into January. Upsets all over the place early season, because how do you come back from a long spring break after fall ball? It becomes an issue.
Yeah. And the weather.
Should we be playing lacrosse in January? I'm not sure we should.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's so difficult. And when you look at, I mean, really everything revolves around the finals, right? Final four. And that was the whole thing that they wanted that around the holiday. And, you know, is it worth doing that? I mean, because that's really what's going to have to move for them to move the season up. And you look at it from a weather standpoint. I mean, you know, you expect, you know, UDM to be outside in this cold. And I get we're a four-season sport, right? You got to play in those things. But sometimes it makes it difficult.
But let's look. UD has a dome. Cleveland State has a dome. Ohio State has a dome. Notre Dame has a dome. Marquette has a dome.
True.
Michigan has a dome. Maybe, and if we're not playing lacrosse in the middle of Memorial Day, get the kids out for summer, and maybe we're down to that situation. The farther south you go, obviously domes aren't needed, but I can't think of a school up here that doesn't have a dome.
It's true.
So maybe that plays in the part of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the last thing we want to talk briefly about, seating just came up across the board. We've always been in fact, the only seated program in the MHSAA family. Other programs now have gone to some of that seating. And the state has kind of given a thought and directive. They had their MHSAA sort of lacrosse meeting with all those involved. I questioned two things. I questioned one of the things is that one of the ADs in the meeting doesn't have a lacrosse team. And I'm not going to give the MHSAA any sort of, BBs for that. But the point is, wouldn't they have a little better understanding of the sport if they actually sponsored it? So that would be my first question. But the second question is they're actually floating the idea of going back to geography as it pertains to what it is. We've never done that since we started in 2004, and I think the other part of that discussion becomes, I'll use local teams. Fenton High School, the team I coach, is going to have to be in a region with Forest Hill Central. Now, all 6 teams in the region are from the area. Forest Hill Central has to jump, 12 counties, about 24 programs in Division II to play. And typically what they've done in the past is the East Grand Rapids, where the winner of that goes in one direction and they flip every other year. This is 2 years in a row and that was an agreement by handshake. Again, they changed. So I'm wondering what's going on with the MHSAA. Should it go back to geography, or should we keep seeding? If we keep seeding, Rice plays Catholic Central early.
Yeah.
So seeding makes sense, but can you manipulate it to the point where are we only seeding for the top 8 teams? And that might be a discussion.
No, I mean it's you think about the travel, you think about the time and for schools to be able to travel and go and bus to bus, and I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think that it warrants a longer discussion, right? And I think it also, the bigger picture is it goes between the MHSA and also the Coaches Association, right? Who's saying what and who's really driving that ship, because it appears to me that the MHSA is trying to step a little bit more and kind of steer the ship a little bit more compared to the Coaches Association. You would know more about that. Where does that go? I mean, who's going to make the ultimate decision on what's best for the teams? You mentioned the AD doesn't even have a program. Having a say in it, I don't see any value in that at all.
I'm not critical of seeding, certainly. It's been wonderful because you don't want Rice playing Central, you don't want East Grand Rapids playing Forest Hill Central. I understand those kinds of things. I go back to using River Rouge as a basketball model when Lofton Green was there in the 60s and 70s. Numerous years of winning championships. I think of Traverse City St. Francis. I think of ski racing, another sport that I'm involved in. I think of Petoskey and Traverse City and Marquette, who'd won it for years until we decided we had to do a better job of coaching our kids. And when we finally started to get the same opportunities, money relates to that, because if you don't have money, you can't have opportunity. But all of a sudden, you get back to around 2005 or 6, downstate teams started to compete. The idea that a downstate coach would, for example, host the state finals was out of the question, because what did we know? Yeah, 80% of ski racing is done in the Detroit area. Things change, and I understand that as part of this discussion. By the way, you're hearing a little bit loud voices behind it. There's a team actually practicing, that's neither here nor there. I think they need to revisit it. I will give Adam Novotny, our president of the Coaches Association, great accolades, because I read the transcripts, and he's certainly stuck up for keeping it the way it is. And I think that makes sense, but maybe there needs to be some reasonable geographic tweaks, because when you do something like that, you open yourself up to sort of discussion of conspiracy, because who's on the committee? Well, it's Forest Hill Central, and it's Clarkston, and it's Brother Rice, and some of those kinds of teams, and it does open itself up to some discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not broke, why fix it? I mean, I think over the last couple of years, the seeding and I think everything's worked out. Yeah, there's been a couple of things here and there where you've had some teams that were, why are they in that? I beat them and this and that and the other thing. But in the end, as long as you put it out there and it's consistent, it was the same thing, about having a certain number of games by the time the seeding selection came, right? There was a whole Catholic Central situation last year, right? Just build it out. Tell what the rules are. Build it out. Everybody's on the same page. Expectations are set, and you just go with it.
Well, we also get tired of the long drawn-out argument that Catholic schools and private schools should have their own league, and we get back to the rest of it. I do know that it's been dominated by a number of few teams, but if you take a school like Heartland, who started out even 15 years ago, wasn't anywhere near the team now, there's a proof that you can build a program that sustains itself and does the same kinds of things. So maybe that's responsible for some of us to stop whining and get after it and do the same conversations. But
100%.
It might be what it is.
Well, you look at the size of some of these schools. I mean, you got a lot of kids to choose from, and a lot of athletes that just aren't playing this sport, right? And you get into the whole football discussion about football coaches not wanting to play, maybe yes and no. And so there's a whole myriad of things you can talk about how you improve and get better.
We always talked about kids emulating professional athletes. And I think back to LeBron getting his group together, and we want 3 of the best players. I want to play with this guy and that guy. You don't think that filters down to high school? And the NEC does a number on that together. So all of a sudden, because we got open school districts now, we came by Grand Blank's football field last night, driving home from an event up in Flint. And as I'm driving down Saginaw Street, and I see this stadium. And oh my! I'd seen it, and it was lit up. And I'm guessing they keep it lit up because it's such a beautiful thing to see from the road. We literally turned around and came back. It's probably would be the best stadium in the MIAA.
Oh, for sure.
It's an unbelievable facility.
Yep.
So we're now throwing money at high school sports the way they were doing in college. Heaven forbid if you got a college and it doesn't have its own food service and its own saunas and all the other stuff that goes with it, and big bar lounge chairs. College athletics becoming somewhat semi-professional to some extent. Whatever happened to participation trophies? That doesn't kind of go with that deal. That's another story for another day.
That's a different story for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, listen, we appreciate your time. We're looking forward to the interview coming up with Ajay. We'll be back in a couple seconds. And for John,
Awesome.
Stay tuned.
Yep.
I want to thank Bryce and all of the guys and Chris Kolon for spending some time with us on the Michigan Lacrosse Review for our November edition. We'll be back in December with some more interviews. We hope you enjoyed the show and have a happy Thanksgiving.